Good morning and thank you for being here. I'm joined, as you can see, by Mayor Evans, members of my command staff. This is for an update on the Maplewood Park shooting. Last year, as I'm sure you all remember, on the evening of July 28th, our community experienced an unforgettable tragedy. Hundreds of community members were together in Maplewood Park, enjoying beautiful weather, a barbecue, and music. Suddenly, joy turned to terror when multiple people arrived with guns and began shooting. Rochester Police officers, as well as the New York State Police, Arundecoit Police Department, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office responded to the park. The Rochester Fire Department and American Medical Response began to triage the victims and transport them to area hospitals. As a result of the dozens of shots fired, 7 people were wounded, including Taisha Manning and Felicia Council, who succumbed to their injuries and lost their lives. Detectives from our major crime section and the technicians unit have spent months poring over physical evidence, interviewing potential witnesses, seeking assistance from the public, and running down each and every lead. Ultimately, this has led to identifying 21-year-old Niger Johnson as one of the people that indiscriminately fired a handgun into the crowd that night. Over the last 5 months, the major crime section has been working hand in hand with the U.S. Marshals Violent Felony Fugitive Task Force in an attempt to locate Johnson. As a result of their tireless efforts, coupled with community tips, they were able to narrow in on Johnson's location. And earlier this morning, members of the task force executed a warrant at Johnson's grandmother's house in the 800 block of Arnett Boulevard. Officers located Johnson inside the house and safely took him into custody. Johnson is currently in the Monroe County Jail, pending arraignment tomorrow morning in Rochester City Court, where he will be charged with reckless endangerment in the first degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. Some of you may ask, where have I heard this name before? Well, Johnson was arrested by us both in 2022 and in 2023 while illegally possessing a handgun here in the city of Rochester. I refer you to previous press releases from Captain Bello on those arrests. The investigation into the tragedy at Maplewood Park is not over. The Major Crimes Unit is continuing to follow up on every investigative lead they get. They will never stop working to identify and apprehend the people responsible for this tragedy. We as a department and as a community owe it to both the council and the Manning families. I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Evans, and then Captain Umbrino will be available for any specific questions.
Thank you, Chief, and I want to thank the brave men and women of the Rochester Police Department for their tireless efforts to continue to fight for justice for the families and the victims in this case that had their lives turned upside down on a beautiful July day back on the 28th of July. Our thoughts are also still with Felicia and Taisha's family, as well as the individuals that were injured that day. But I want to say to the community, while we are happy to have this one individual in custody, we still need to continue to keep our feet on the gas until all of the individuals responsible for the heinous act that took place on July 28th are brought to justice. If you remember, there were probably about 16 people that were identified that had firearms. We need to make sure that they know that there will be no safe place for them to try to hide. They need to be brought to the light, but more importantly, they need to be able to be brought to justice, just like my hope and prayer is that this individual will also be brought to justice. As you know, Taisha and Felicia were both brave community members that had their entire lives ahead of them. They were members of our community, and they were all doing things in the community to make a positive impact on our community. Taisha was one of our city employees, working in our city recreation centers with young people. They loved her. She was beloved by her coworkers. She was beloved by her family. Same thing with Felicia, who was also working in the human service field to help people. We owe it to the families of Felicia and Taisha to make sure that we get justice for this individual that was apprehended this morning, but we also owe it to them to make sure that the other 15 people who were seen carrying firearms are also brought to justice. I also want to give a special thanks to the community. The community reached out to the mayor's office, to the police department, to the broader community, and they said that they had enough. There were grandmothers in the park that day. There were little kids in the park that day. A day that was supposed to be a day of celebration should not have been turned into a day of horror and unnecessary destruction. People brought their beefs and their issues and affected people who had nothing to do with whatever issues they had going on. That's something that we cannot tolerate in this community, and I hope that this arrest today sends the message that we will continue to hunt down and pursue justice for individuals that perpetrate straight up carnage in our community. I'm hopeful for our community because our community has made it clear that they have had enough. They don't want any excuses for individuals that go in the parks and shoot at old people, kids, and women. And that is what we had happen on July 28th. So I thank the Rochester Police Department for their unwavering commitment to solving this crime. And I thank the broader community for their tips, their prayers, and the hope for a better Rochester. And it is my hope that we will continue to make sure that we pursue justice. But more importantly, I ask that this community takes another moment and pray for the families of Felicia and Taisha who brought in the new year without their loved ones. Thank you.
You guys have questions? I'll answer what I can.
Was Johnson on any kind of monitoring, parole, probation at the time of the shooting?
No, he was not on any type of monitoring at the time of the shooting.
Frank, we're about 7 months removed from that shooting. What prompted this arrest now?
Well, we've been looking for him for the last, I believe, 5 or 6 months. We were working very closely with our members on the Marshals Task Force, and we were just getting roadblocks. We did not get a lot of cooperation from the family, and finally, because of the work that our investigators on the task force did, we were able to zero in on a location for him. We were confident it was there, and that's when we executed the search warrant or the arrest warrant this morning and took him into custody. So we've been looking, we just haven't been able to find him up until now.
Captain, for the amount of suspects still left to be pursued, is there anything you can clarify for us right now that could connect you based off of this arrest to those people?
No, it's pretty much where we were before, right? It's a very complex case. We have over 16 people that were in the park with weapons that we're aware of, and we had almost 50 rounds fired from at least 9 different guns. It's a very complex case. It's a very difficult case to be able to charge somebody with any of the various crimes that were committed. That doesn't mean we're not going to continue to try. In Mr. Johnson's case, we were able to do that. It's just a very high burden of proof that we have to come up with, and it's very difficult when it's that complex.
I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. Reckless endangerment at the top charge, 2 women died. And most of the community would be thinking, well, why is he being charged with murder? Why is he being charged with anything related to that? So could you just explain a little bit?
Yes. So basically, in order to charge somebody with murder, you have to be able to say that this gun was fired by this person and shot this victim and killed this victim. And in Mr. Johnson's case, number one, we don't believe that he fired the shot that killed either one of the victims. The reckless endangerment is for firing a gun in a park where there's hundreds of people with complete total disregard for everybody that's there and not caring about anybody but yourself and recklessly firing that gun in the park. Nobody was struck by his bullets as far as we know, but the act itself of firing a gun in a crowded park like that is what substantiates the reckless endangerment.
And just to clarify, the CPW, did he have a gun on him at the time when he was arrested?
No, but we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he possessed a gun on the day in question and that was an operable gun because he fired it.
Frank, is he seen in one of the videos we've been playing or photos you've identified?
Yes, I believe he was suspect number 9, if I'm not mistaken.
And can you describe what he looks like in that photo or that video?
He had long braids, which he has since cut, and I believe he's like crouched down, holding the gun. But it was in fact number 9 on the.
How do you know the bullets that he is accused of firing didn't hit him?
Like we said before, Berkeley, it's like putting a puzzle together, right? From where he was standing and where the victims were standing, we're pretty confident that none of his rounds struck any of the victims. It wouldn't make sense. But we're able to put him in a specific spot at a specific time firing the gun.
We know that one of the victims would be celebrating a birthday later this month. Felicia Council heard from her father. He is calling this, in less words, a belated birthday present. How have you been working with the family to make sure that you can close at least the primary suspect?
Well, what I can tell you is that the families of both victims, the primary contacts that we have our investigators' personal cell phone numbers. And, we don't talk to them every week, but we communicate with them regularly. And, and I know that the investigators talked to the contacts this morning, once we took Mr. Johnson into custody to let them know. So that, that's what pushes the investigators to do what they do, is to be able to try to provide answers for the family. And this doesn't answer all their questions, but at least it gives them some sense of, hey, something's happening here. Somebody's hopefully going to be held accountable for the horrific events that happened.
I know that you mentioned that you're still looking for the other individuals. Will there be plans to put out photos again of the individuals that you guys are looking for?
Yes, we can put out photos again of everybody that we've disseminated. There may be a few less. We've identified, I want to say we've identified just about all of them. There may be a couple that we still haven't, identified. And we've talked to a bunch of them as well. But again, in order to charge somebody, we have to have, there's a very stringent threshold that we have to meet, and we may not necessarily be able to meet it on some of the other individuals that we've identified.
Out of that 16, is there a number that you think came to the park that day with malicious intent? Is there, some of them may have pulled out their weapon for self-defense purposes?
We're not going to get into specific motives, but what we are comfortable telling you at this point in time, there was a group of 4 or 5 individuals who were younger than the majority of the crowd that showed up with bad intent that started this whole thing. I don't think anybody else that was in the park, although they had guns, I don't think that anybody else was necessarily there to start trouble. But these 4 or 5 individuals showed up with bad intent, and that's what set off the terrible chain of events. Last one.
I guess just how does this, how does this compare, right? Because, 6 months, an exhaustive search. Just last month we talked to Captain Bello about where the department was standing. We knew who this prime suspect was and fighting to identify. Just comparing, I guess, to, I don't know.
Other cases, how long it takes?
We don't want to be in this situation ever, right? But 6 months go by and it's a lot of time and there's a lot of.
Yeah, and it's, sometimes it's harder to find people than other times, and it doesn't help when you have family members that are harboring people and not being honest with the police. And, we are investigating that, and we will levy charges if we can for anybody that's harboring a known fugitive. And I think what this shows is that we don't give up, we don't quit. I mean, we'll travel all over the country, sometimes all over the world, to grab our suspects, and we do that. And sometimes it takes longer than we want it to, but, we don't stop and we won't stop. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.